Welcome to Curious Minds. If you're trying to get a handle on the big forces shaping our world, well, you've definitely come to the right place. Before we jump in, if you find this kind of exploration useful, please do give us a like, subscribe for more deep dives like this one, and maybe drop a comment. Let us know what you think or any questions you have. We really do like hearing from you.
Absolutely.
So today we are diving deep, really deep, into a pretty critical comparison. The military power balance between the USA and China, looking at roughly the 2024-2025 timeframe.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. We've been digging into some recent analysis.
Right. And the goal here is to give you a clear, kind of digestible understanding of where these two global players stand militarily. We're going to unpack the key differences across 10, critical areas.
10 key dimensions. It should give everyone a solid overview.
Exactly, providing those essential insights. So let's just get straight into it. I mean, when you talk military might, the first thing usually is money, right? Resources.
That's the foundation, often. Yeah. Let's kick off with the defense budget. The United States allocates over $850 billion annually.
$850 billion. Wow.
Yeah. And just for context, that is by far the largest military budget on the planet.
Right.
And that huge sum, it supports everything. Their worldwide operations, cutting-edge R&D, a really large personnel force, and, well, just a staggering number of sophisticated weapons platforms.
It's a colossal figure. It really speaks to that ability to, project power globally and maintain influence pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so China, their budget isn't that big, but it's still massive, right? Second largest?
That's right. Around $225 billion annually. Still number 2 globally, which is significant.
Okay, so a big gap between number 1 and 2, but still a huge investment from China. What's their sort of strategic thinking behind that spin? Where's it going?
Their main focus seems to be very much on rapid modernization. They're really funneling resources into developing advanced missile systems, significantly expanding their Navy, we'll get into that later, and boosting their own domestic production capacity.
So less about global presence, more about upgrading and self-reliance.
Exactly. While the U.S. outspends them significantly overall, particularly on, say, future tech research and maintaining that global footprint, China's investment is, you could say, laser-focused on building a modern, regionally powerful military and becoming less dependent on foreign tech.
That's a really interesting dynamic. So the U.S. has the bigger overall pot, but China's perhaps concentrating its fire more. Could be disruptive down the line.
Potentially, yeah. It raises that question, size versus focus.
Okay, fascinating point. A bigger budget isn't everything. Which leads us nicely into point 2. Where are these militaries actually located? Global military presence.
Right, and this is where you see a really, really stark difference. The United States maintains this unparalleled global network. We're talking over 750 military bases.
750, wow.
In more than 80 countries. It gives them these strategic footholds, everywhere, important Europe, Asia, the Middle East. It allows for incredibly rapid global response.
The logistics alone must be incredible.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the ability to move troops, equipment, gather intelligence. It's a huge advantage.
It really is like having pieces, positioned all over the global chessboard. So how does China compare on that front?
Well, it's a completely different picture. China has, officially at least, just one acknowledged overseas military base. That's in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa.
It's one.
Just one official military base.
Yeah.
Now, their economic influence, that's expanding massively through things like the Belt and Road Initiative, which often involves investments in ports around the world.
Right, the port investments. People talk about those potentially having dual use.
There's definitely debate around that. But in terms of projecting traditional military power far from home, their capability is, well, still pretty limited compared to the U.S. Their focus seems much more regional on their immediate neighborhood.
Got it. So U.S. global infrastructure, global reach. China. Currently much more concentrated regionally.
That sums it up well, yeah.
Okay, so the U.S. has the reach, but what about the kit, the actual tech? Let's dig into technological superiority. This is always changing, right?
Constantly evolving. Currently, the U.S. generally holds an edge in several key areas. Think stealth aircraft, the F-22 Raptor, the F-35.
Right, the 5th-gen fighters.
Exactly. Also, really advanced drone technology for all sorts of missions, reconnaissance, strike. And sophisticated cyber warfare capabilities, both offense and defense.
That is huge now.
And electronic warfare, jamming, spoofing, that kind of thing. Plus, they're really pushing the envelope on integrating artificial intelligence into military systems driven by places like DARPA.
DARPA, yeah. Always working on the next big thing. So these are technologies that could really make a difference in a conflict. But China, I mean, everyone knows they're catching up fast technologically. Where are they making the biggest waves?
They are making impressive strides, no question, particularly in areas like hypersonics. Their DFZF hypersonic glide vehicle, for example, caused quite a stir. It could potentially evade current missile defenses.
Hypersonics are a big worry for planners, aren't they?
Definitely. They're also investing massively in AI and quantum research, quantum computing, quantum communications. These could be revolutionary.
Quantum, wow. That's next level stuff.
It is. And they have their own stealth fighter, the J-20, although most analysts still think it doesn't quite match the F-22's overall performance.
Okay. Still, it's a stealth fighter.
It is. And it's worth mentioning, China has historically been, shall we say, very aggressive in acquiring foreign technology, sometimes through reverse engineering or other means, to speed up their own development.
Right, that's often part of the conversation.
So the takeaway, the U.S. probably still has a broader technological lead overall, but China is closing that gap incredibly quickly in certain critical niches. We could see parity or even Chinese advantages in specific areas sooner rather than later.
It really does sound like this intense technological race, a constant back and forth. Okay, let's shift gears to something with, well, existential weight. Nuclear capabilities.
Yeah, the ultimate deterrent. Here again, the U.S. has a significantly larger and arguably more diverse arsenal. We're talking roughly 5,000 total nuclear warheads.
5,000.
Total. Of those, around 1,770 are estimated to be currently deployed and ready. And critically, the U.S. maintains a full nuclear triad.
Land, sea, and air delivery, right?
Exactly. Land-based ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs, and strategic bombers carrying nuclear bombs or missiles. That ensures a very robust second strike capability. Basically, they can retaliate even if they suffer a surprise first attack.
That redundancy seems key for deterrence theory. How does China's nuclear posture compare?
China's arsenal is considerably smaller. Estimates put it around 500 warheads currently.
Okay, 500 versus 5,000 total for the U.S. Big difference.
A very big difference. They are in the process of developing their own triad capability, building more silos for land-based missiles, developing new submarines, upgrading bombers, but it's not considered fully operational across all three legs yet to the same extent as the U.S.
And their doctrine is different too, isn't it?
Officially, yes. China adheres to a no first use policy. They state they would never be the first to use nuclear weapons in a conflict. The U.S. does not have such a policy.
Right, so clear differences in scale, readiness, and stated policy. Okay, let's move from the ultimate weapon to controlling the seas. Navy strength.
Okay, the U.S. Navy. Its main strength is arguably unparalleled power projection, meaning the ability to operate and exert influence far from its own shores across the globe.
The carrier groups, right.
Exactly. They operate 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. These are essentially mobile, sovereign airfields.
Yeah.
Huge force multipliers.
11, that's incredible.
Plus, over 90 advanced destroyers and cruisers packed with missiles and sensors. And their submarine fleet, especially the Virginia-class attack subs and the Ohio-class ballistic missile and guided missile subs, is exceptionally powerful and stealthy. Global reach, high-tech capability.
Okay, so the U.S. Navy is built for global power projection.
Mm-hmm.
What about China's Navy? We hear constantly about how fast it's growing.
It is growing incredibly fast. And in fact, by sheer number of ships, China now has the world's largest navy.
More ships than the U.S. Navy.
Yes, in total number of hulls, though, that includes many smaller vessels like corvettes and patrol boats. They currently have 3 aircraft carriers, 2 of which are actively serving. The third is newer and undergoing trials.
3 carriers now, still far fewer than 11, but growing.
Right, and they've made huge investments in modern destroyers, frigates, submarines. But their naval strategy seems very different. It appears heavily focused on achieving dominance closer to home within what they call the first and second island chains.
The A2AD strategy. Anti-accessoria denial.
Exactly. They've developed very potent A2AD capabilities. Think long-range anti-ship ballistic missiles, sometimes called carrier killers, advanced submarines, integrated air defense systems, all designed to make it very risky for an adversary, like the U.S. Navy, to operate near China's coast.
So a different philosophy. U.S. Navy, global reach, China's Navy, build a fortress in their backyard, basically.
That's a pretty good way to put it. Regional dominance versus global projection.
Okay, interesting contrast. Let's stick to the skies now. Air Force strength.
The United States Air Force, USAF, is just dominant globally.
Yeah.
With 13,000 aircraft in total.
13,000.
Yeah. That includes a large fleet of those advanced stealth fighters we mentioned, the F-35 and F-22, plus long-range strategic bombers like the B-2 and B-52, soon the B-21, and a huge fleet of drones for all kinds of tasks.
And the support aircraft, too, I imagine. Tankers, transports.
Absolutely critical. Their global refueling capability, with hundreds of tanker aircraft and strategic airlift capability, with planes like the C-17 and C-5, is unmatched. It allows them to deploy and sustain air power virtually anywhere on Earth for long periods.
That logistical tail is often underestimated, isn't it?
Hugely important. So how does China's Air Force, the PLAAF, stack up?
Well, they have significantly fewer aircraft overall, around 3,000.
Still a large number, but less than a quarter of the U.S. inventory.
Right.
They do have their J-20 stealth fighter, as we discussed, and a rapidly growing fleet of drones. They're modernizing very quickly, replacing older Soviet-era designs with indigenous ones.
But the global reach part.
That's the key difference again. They currently lack the sheer numbers of strategic transport aircraft and, especially, aerial refueling tankers needed for sustained, large-scale global operations like the USIF can conduct. Their focus, much like the Navy, seems more regional for now.
So a significant gap remains there, both in numbers and, crucially, in that global operational reach.
Correct. The U.S. maintains a pretty clear quantitative and qualitative advantage in overall air power, particularly for global missions.
Understood. Okay, now let's move into these newer but absolutely critical domains, cyber and space.
The new high grounds, essentially. Both nations see these as vital. The U.S. has really underlined this focus by creating dedicated branches. The Space Force and U.S. Cyber Command.
Separate branches, yeah, that statement.
It is. They currently hold, well, a dominant position in satellite capabilities, surveillance, communications, and crucially, GPS, which almost all modern military systems rely on. They also have very sophisticated cyber tools for both hacking into enemy systems and defending their own networks, and potentially capabilities to disable or destroy enemy satellites.
War in space isn't science fiction anymore.
Unfortunately not. So how's China approaching cyber in space?
They've taken a slightly different organizational approach, consolidating most of their space, cyber, electronic, and psychological warfare capabilities under one umbrella. The Strategic Support Force, or SSF.
SSF.
Okay.
They've demonstrated worrying capabilities, like conducting an anti-satellite or ASAT missile test back in 2007, which created a huge debris field.
Right, they caused a lot of international concern.
It did. They're also pioneers in things like quantum satellites for potentially ultra-secure communications. And in the cyber domain, well, China is widely recognized as a major global player, frequently accused of large-scale cyber espionage and developing its own offensive cyber weapons.
So another area of intense competition. The U.S. might have a more established infrastructure, maybe dominance in some areas like GPS, but China is innovating aggressively and developing potentially disruptive capabilities like ASATs and maybe cyber tools.
That's a fair summary. It's a rapidly evolving battlefield in both domains, and China is clearly determined to catch up and, in some cases, leapfrog.
Okay, very dynamic. Now let's shift back to a more, perhaps, traditional element of power, military alliances, friends and partners.
This is an area where the U.S. has a massive, long-standing advantage. It sits at the center of this deep network of formal military alliances. Think NATO and Europe.
The cornerstone.
Absolutely. Then there's AUKUS with the UK and Australia, the QAD security dialogue with Japan, India, and Australia, plus numerous bilateral defense treaties with key nations like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Thailand.
It's a global network. What do these alliances actually provide?
Huge benefits. Shared intelligence, bases, and logistical support around the world, forces that train together and can operate together, interoperability, and, crucially, collective security guarantees. An attack on one is considered an attack on all in many cases.
That's a powerful deterrent and force multiplier. What does China's alliance picture look like?
It's very different. China doesn't really have any formal military alliances in the way the U.S. does, with binding mutual defense pacts.
No equivalent to NATO.
Nothing really comparable. They do have strong strategic partnerships with countries like Russia and also Pakistan, Iran to some extent. And they lead the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO.
The SCO, right. Often seen as a counterweight to Western influence.
It has a security dimension focused mainly on counterterrorism and regional stability in Central Asia, but it's not a military alliance like NATO. The relationships tend to be more political and economic or based on specific shared interests rather than deep, integrated military cooperation and mutual defense guarantees.
So the U.S. has this global team bound by treaties, while China operates more independently, relying on partnerships that seem perhaps less binding militarily.
Generally, yes. That established alliance network gives the U.S. a significant strategic depth and global support structure that China currently lacks.
Okay, that's a clear difference. Now let's talk about something harder to quantify but incredibly important: military experience and training.
Yeah, the human element. You can't just buy combat experience. The U.S. military has, well, accumulated a vast amount of it over the last couple of decades.
Iraq, Afghanistan.
Syria, counterterrorism operations across Africa and the Middle East. This isn't just about individual soldiers. It's about how the entire system learns tactics, logistics, joint operations between the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. They practice this constantly in large, realistic exercises, often with allies, like NATO forces.
That real-world testing must be invaluable. How does China's PLA, the People's Liberation Army, compare on that front? They haven't fought a major war in a long time, right?
That's correct. Their last large-scale conflict was the border war with Vietnam back in 1979.
Wow, over 40 years ago.
Exactly.
Good.
Now, their training has reportedly improved dramatically in recent years. It's become much more realistic, more complex, focusing on joint operations. They're clearly working hard to bridge that experience gap.
Trying to simulate combat conditions as best they can.
Yes, through intensive exercises and simulations. And they are undergoing major reforms to modernize their doctrine and command structure. But there's really no substitute for actual sustained combat operations when it comes to battle-hardening troops and testing systems under fire.
So you'd say U.S. personnel are generally considered more seasoned, more battle-tested due to recent history.
That's the general consensus among military analysts, yes. It's a key qualitative difference, though one China is actively trying to mitigate through training and reform.
Understood. Okay, finally, our 10th point: industrial and production capacity. The ability to actually build all this military hardware.
Crucial factor, especially in any kind of prolonged competition or conflict. The USA has a highly advanced defense industrial base. Think major aerospace and defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman.
The big names?
Right. They produce arguably the most technologically sophisticated military hardware in the world. High-quality, precision-engineered stuff. The focus is often on cutting-edge innovation.
But sometimes it's criticized for being slow or incredibly expensive, right?
That's the flip side. It can be bureaucratic, subject to complex regulations, and the costs for top-tier systems are astronomical. Production rates for some key items might be slower than desired.
Okay, so high-tech, high-quality, but perhaps slower and costlier. How does China's defense industry compare?
China's defense industrial base is state-led and has expanded at breathtaking speed. Their real strength seems to be in mass production capacity.
Sheer volume.
Yes. Especially in areas like shipbuilding, they're churning out warships at an incredible rate. Also, missile development and production and drone manufacturing, they can produce large quantities relatively quickly.
What about the quality and innovation side for China? Historically, they relied a lot on copying or adapting foreign designs.
That was certainly true and likely still happens, but they are increasingly developing their own indigenous capabilities and innovating in certain areas. The quality is improving rapidly, though perhaps not yet consistently matching the very top-end U.S. systems across the board, but the sheer volume they can produce is a significant advantage.
So a contrast again, U.S. excels in top-tier quality and innovation, maybe slower production. China has incredible speed and volume of production with rapidly improving quality and growing innovation.
That captures the essence of it, I think. Two different industrial models with different strengths.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground across those 10 points.
Yeah.
So just to try and wrap this up, bring it all together, this comparison, USA versus China militarily, it really shows a complex, very dynamic picture, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's not simple. You can see the U.S. currently holds significant advantages in several key traditional metrics: the overall budget, that unmatched global presence and reach, a technological edge in many critical areas, a much larger and more diverse nuclear arsenal, superior global power projection with its Navy and Air Force. that strong alliance network, and importantly, recent combat experience.
Right, a formidable list of strengths.
But on the other side, China is this rapidly modernizing force. They're closing technological gaps fast, they're focused intensely on dominating their region, and they have this incredible industrial capacity for mass production, especially naval ships and missiles. You absolutely cannot discount their speed and volume.
So different strengths, different weaknesses, different strategic goals almost. What do you think stands out most for you from all this? What should people really take away?
For me, it's how these differing profiles might shape future events. The U.S. strengths seem geared towards global stability, deterrence, and potentially intervention anywhere. China's strengths look more focused on challenging the U.S. presence in Asia, asserting regional dominance, and making intervention near their borders incredibly costly for any adversary.
It sets up this potential clash of systems and strategies, particularly in the Indo-Pacific.
Exactly. And the really interesting question for you, listening to ponder, is, given these distinct advantages and limitations, what do you see as the biggest risks or the most likely flashpoints? How might this competition play out, and what does it mean for global security?
Those are the big questions, definitely. Thinking about the implications as this balance continues to shift.
It's something everyone needs to keep watching.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really comprehensive look. Thank you for breaking it down like that.
Right.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this deep dive comparing U.S. and Chinese military power.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
We genuinely hope this gave you a clearer picture of this really critical relationship and the current military balance. Until our next exploration, keep those curious minds engaged.